알아서 동반이 도간 가사되게다 된지 로셰인 바다 아니 된지 디베토 별로디 아니 그래서 된진데라 캡틴 체마메바 아니 디베토 별로데라 캡틴 체마여바 네 친제 말로바 임바데 뇨웨게 도고레서지 먼저 디시쇼에 디고시 디네자다 셈 라싱이 주베 동바세야 딩아주 셈제 탐지기를 유대바래 된자디 아주기를 유바지 로브기 때문에 마다바 로브기 때문에 제바래 된자다 상기기 셈 라싱이 기 마주바디 주마 탐제다다 세바레스 균 탐제다 세바레스 그래서 라싱이 다바니랑 뭐 개발 매나양 로브기 때문에 다마다게 개발 요래서 시로하다 나주기 뭐 로브기 때문에 마다바래 제자다 나주기를 동반이 또 곰제 다 로브기 때문에 세야디 된제나 녀모 받쳐서 로브기 때문에 디 동니도 배시라 곰발레 때네 대수 바빵바이 빵용도 내가 나주기 셈라싱이 맞주비 동바 대야 동니디야네 그야 그제 뭐니 공고주고래서지 대신 아주 쇼에 디고르시 맞주버와.
Good afternoon. This morning, continuing to look at this section, we saw how the yogin who comes to realize emptiness realizes that not only how phenomena all appear as truly existent, but when strongly focused on by awareness, they are grasped at existing in the way that they appear, but that this grasping is not supported by a valid cognizer, this grasping at true existence. Whereas the mind that the yogin has realized, the mind that is realizing emptiness, this is supported by a valid cognizer. Moreover, this morning we looked at how, whilst the nature of our mind, which is pure and free of all contaminations, is no different from the empty nature of the mind of Buddhas, our mind is obscured by a veil of adventitious afflictions, whereas a being that has arisen as a Buddha has completely eradicated all those contaminations, the afflictions, the seeds, and the imprints, through cultivating the wisdom realizing emptiness to the point of perfection. So this too is something that we can do. And in that way, due to having Buddha nature, Buddha potential, we can eradicate the adventitious afflictions, these temporary afflictions which obscure the nature of our mind, and eradicate them completely and arise as the Dharmakaya. Let's immediately continue with the text, starting at the very top of page 23. Thus the glorious Dhammakirti says in his commentary on Dignaga's Compendium of Valid Cognition, an ascertaining mind and a falsely superimposing mind are entities of refuter and that which is to be refuted.
다같이 뇌발라는 아주 유티 토픽 참아들 뇌바시고로와 지난다 아주기 동방이 토픽 참아싱 해비로 저도라데 나디 도쇼들라 로로셰들 시고로 근데 덴버주바집에 된진디 저도래 자 덴버주바집에 된진디 저도래 디 도쇼 덴버마주바 토픽 동이 토픽로디다 뇌 동이비로데 디 나제 뇌시레 나제 뇌시레스 나제 그래서 뇌제디 가르라나 덴진디 덴버주바집에 덴진 저도래 덴진디 저도디레스 다 덴바 마주바 토픽로디 참아디다 덴진디 저도디 뇌제들 뇌제레스 그래서 덴바 메바 토픽로디 곰바이나 아니 덴진이 메바 수고레스 제전 콜뉴고레 코 뇌제디 디레스 제전 덴진 메바 수고레스 제전 내제 뇌바다네 저도에 내제 뇌지 모이치스 제자다 뇌바다 저도에 내제 뇌지레스 모레스
So looking at this quotation then, an ascertaining mind and a falsely superimposing mind are entities of refuter and that which is to be refuted. An ascertaining mind then refers to a valid cognizer which realizes its object. And in this instance, it is the wisdom realizing emptiness. And the falsely superimposing mind is the opposite to such a valid cognition. And here refers to the ignorance of true grasping. And these two are respectively the refuter and the refuted, in that the wisdom realizing emptiness is what refutes the refuted, the superimposing mind, the ignorance of true grasping. Or to use synonyms, are entities of eradicator and that which is to be eradicated.
Adini ngeba dani jodo sedida that mangbul chayoro beneda deji mashuwe shebane mitaba to bi nganzugi nga gansa mitaba to bi chamadi the gansa mitaba ngeba sede ngebi lois da jodo de kasen nga dabazima dazen de jodo she 제사다 nga taba to be dazen di meba suegi nöse shidi nga dabazima dazen ire di delya nögen sunugresene nga mitabato biologique nge biologique nugores 제가 nga mitabato biologique 용도 디 로디기 토피에네 기용도 nga taba스메 따선데 메가 자루고라 도루고레스 진짜 도루고레스네.
Many illustrations can be given here. So let's take one that I've mentioned this morning and last night, which is when someone has meditated well on impermanence and come to realize with a valid cognition that the person is impermanent, that would be, to use the terminology here, an ascertaining mind, a valid cognizer in this case, realizing that the person changes momentarily. And what is opposite to that? A falsely superimposing mind, which would be grasping at the person as permanent, as unchanging. So here, the refuter is a valid cognizer, realizing that the person changes momentarily, and the refuted is the grasping at the person as being unchanging.
아니 디나해 다디네 안주게 지게 안주게 온숨다 하고 뒤에를 셰베네 베네 메로지나 디 차월에 선배 또 베게 디 차부 열에 선배 또 베 채마디 녀바지 메 차와인 뱅이 비 녀바지 다디네 메디 차부 열 말에 선배 선모디다 조도로 와다 제베네 가소레 디 정물에서 메디 정물에서 선배 선모디다 조도 차르고 와 제사다 녀바 메 차와 또 베기 디 차와인 또 베 채마디 여바 있나 니 차와 말에 선배기 차와 정물에 선배 조도디 메바 차로 메바 도로 그래 메바 차로 그래서 진짜 조도 왔어 내가 봤을 때 그 차산이야 안두스진데 잘 주고 그래 봐. 그리고 이제 메 채마 메 차고래 선배 또베 채마디 다 내바로 내바시로.
Similarly, a consciousness that ascertains that fire is hot, such a consciousness is a ascertaining consciousness and a valid cognizer realizing that fire is hot. Its contrary or opposite consciousness is a consciousness which believes fire not to be hot but to be cold. And so the one refutes the other.
디나 생각은 가서 유말 배신 셔라 유마셔도 변 뒤로도 가난 마두신 바루샤바 주샤바 통해도 나는 저기 변 뒤에 가난 마두 수송 선배게 선별로디에 조도 차대로 와 주요 말도 수송 선배스로 조도로 와 제사디 그 가서래디 고하다야지 디 금세데 하고 또베 참마 주요 선배 참마디 내바래 제사 디 내바 여바나 데네기 주소 선별로디 조도도 요 말해서 제사 데네기 용 말해서 내가 주기다 내바다네 조도 세디 바락바당 안에 지게 참모다 차상다 간실레 로 참마 유대도 될 미베 참마 대당 니 도쇼 조도니 보디 디니 진당원수 가와래 제가 가와서 코니 찍번 간세 지유를 뒤지도 님도 용하여 말해서 그러다 그 용하여 말 참마디 데니 또베 참마디 끼도 조도디 매바 차로 그래서 디 도초 조도 세니
there's so many illustrations that can be given here, but let's stay with what we've covered this weekend. So last night I mentioned about an illusion, and for example, if one sees a long sword being swallowed, and your friend, who's also a magician, will understand how this trick is done, and that the magician before one is not really in danger. You, on the other hand, fear arises thinking, this just may be something awful that I'm about to witness. So here, your friend has given rise to a valid cognizer, because the friend has ascertained that this is an illusion, this is a trick. Whereas oneself has a superimposing consciousness. We're imposing a value onto this which it does not possess. So now to talk in general, between an ascertaining consciousness, so this realizing valid cognizer, and a superimposing consciousness, they apprehend their object in contrary ways. So their mode of apprehension or the way of apprehending is contradictory.
Dalai 당한주 델리아 라싱인 주바 잼비기 덴진디 고 조도레 덴바랑 문에 주바 나와나 랑문에 주바 잼바디 덴지레 짐마나신 주요 말레스 제사다 짐마나 요 말때 안주 줄레디 잼바디 요데레스 다디 메바소에게 냠보데 가르레스네 데메도 베셔랍데레 데맹에비 또벌 셰바시라레 제사디 곰발레 때네 안 덴진 메바소고라 가선 디뇌겐디 니게 뇌투고레 에서 동요도 베셔라디가 마도 샹다게 콜 뇌투고 말레스 덴진데라 디나신 안주게 따바침베 따신데라야 메바소에데 미다바도 오래 미다바도 별로디 콘뇌투고 뇌지레스 제사 딘뇌투고레 제사 미다바도 별로디 콤바 또발라 미다바도 발라데네 따바침베 따신 도로레스 온디네레스 제사디 고 나제 뇌지레스 디스모라.
The illustrations we've used most for refuter and refuted this weekend is grasping at true existence is what is to be refuted, and is done by the contrary mind, the antidote, the emptiness, the wisdom realizing the emptiness of true existence. Similarly, grasping at permanence, this is eradicated by its antidote, the contrary mind of the wisdom realizing emptiness. So these two, or both of these, they're not illustrations of the refuted and the refuter.
아니네 자당 저기 비네 답아침비 다진세디 당아주 미다바시디 기지기 지바 랑주비 기지니바네 매바 가조 바데라 미다바 기지 또수 미다바 또한데 랑주비 기지니바데 미니바데 가조고 바데 또요도 아는 저기 나 아니 지게 어디시 쇼는 수가 요래 선배 삼로 다시 나 되네 가산 중가 요래 선배서 다시 띵아 산이 바도 되기리 나로지마 바도 요래 선배 삼로 다시 디소 제상도 스타선 디게 두스네 기지기지 지바 삼당에도 랑주비 기지니바네 바 가조고 요바데 삼다니 미 조바데 가조고 요바 또에 미다바 또로 그래 미다바 또 보이네 되네게 다신데 도로 그래 제래.
When meditating on emptiness, one will reflect that the person that's sitting here now in the afternoon session, whilst appearing as if the same person as what sat in the session this morning, actually there's been a continuous stream of change. And here, to what eliminates or refutes or eradicates the grasping at the person as being permanent is the understanding that the person changes momentarily. And in this way, the person of this morning and the person of now are not identical. Likewise, the person that will arise as a Buddha is not identical to the person now either.
소소를 미시 삼당 제상 소소를 삼당 미다바데 소소기 미다바 삼당에 기지기지 지로바데 삼당에도 제상다 나주기 기지기지 지유바데 삼당에도 제상아주 그디나 무티체 균에 지혜메 되겐 무티의 징을 요래 되기를 선비기 짐바 디 매바 차로 거와 니 매바 차고래지 되네기 담진디 매바 차게래스 다디 차발라 때는 아주래 가르 연구에서네 되네 지도바 진짜 땀 아주 기지기 지네 안에 가슴질에 타말이야 아주 수보다 셈 차상 바 제지네 셈디 수보다 제지네 되네 치와서야지 매두고 그래서야지 디하고 그러봐 되네 하고도 치와서로 수보다 셈 제지 시로도 셈 수보다 치와서래 제가 더 가도 되네 디 윤치마데 가하두고서는 양자지 개와 양자지 수부지 루시 랭고 디 개와 치마라게 그래서 제가 디 용야라야 디 약부 용야라 유디 아주 다든에 싸고 그래서지 안데네게 치와 미다 봐서 삼당에도 제가 주기 개와 치마서야 돼 삼리고래 개와 치마선 리여도 개와 치마데라 약부 용야기 유디 주벽이 탑람들에 삼로디 코고 그래 탐 디코로도 디 최제에게 안 삼로 코고 그래서 제사데 치와 미다 봤음다네 최제에게 냠는제에게 삼로디 듬바디 레투고 그래 제사 디네 장한저 람림나는 마시에도 단주에 니에가와 치와 미다 봐서시고 제사 치와 미다 봐 소수된도 치와 미다 봐 삼당 그래 디 삼당에도 최제에게 듬바 되냐들 일이에서 제사 딜레가 된다라 치와 미다 봐 송거래 송바로 와서 람림나가 좀 냠는제도 갑라
This weekend I've emphasized the importance of reflecting on impermanence, and I want to do so again now. Applying this understanding of impermanence, especially subtle impermanence, momentary change, to ourselves. Reflecting how we think of ourselves as being unchanging, as permanent, but in fact we change momentarily so. And by thinking in this way, we'll start to impact on this grasping at ourselves as being continually identical from the past to the present and from the present to the future. And reflecting on the self in this way, we apply it the same reflection to the body and the mind as well. And then we come to recognize that this body will cease, this life will end, the body and mind will separate, and what happens then is a new birth is taken. And where that new birth happens to be and the conditions surrounding that birth depends on causes that are accumulated. And those causes we have the power to accumulate right now. What I've just mentioned here, you'll know from the Lama presentations of the reflection on the impermanence of this life. And this is such an important reflection. It's called as one of the reflections that turns the mind towards the Dharma. Or to express it differently, it's one of the reflections that opens the gateway through which we can enter into the Dharma. And this is crucial to engage in, to ensure that one has a mind that has the strength to turn away from distraction and be focused on the topics of the Dharma at all times.
두신의 끼지끼지 집어 삼다데 체디기 뒤세디 통노라 남상 조종해서 다 치마세디 배 윤능으로 통수고라 배네 개와 치마데 치네 양 치마지 양신의 체 치마 개와 치마세디 조야메 레디 같이 루아다 개와 치마세지 제가 다른 디네 삼다데 만저 체디 뒤세디 통노로 자 치마세디 양네 양들레 링부로 차고 제네 디네장 제산 체델이야 어다 체디기 뒤수 통로를 아주 벤디로 하다 로직스데 디링 님을 뒤수 통로에 디링 님 로사데 망부래 저 산인의 파스데 다른 부로 하지사 님을 뭐 망부지 된다라 판도 제 된다라 디링 님직 링이야 갈래가 잡나 잡투 그래서 잡고도 선배 삼을 리그로 니나시 아주게 직두스 미다 봤음도네 체디기라 안베 직 착신 담신 담베 직 딱진게 직 삼로디 도루레스 당진게 삼로디 다도 심바 딱발게 나 네기레스면 딱진 소라 안디기 삼로 도루레스 체델리안 낭위게 나와 차상 배 약보래 아니 그 디기디나 템부 디그리 심비게 나신 도그리 나와다 심바 도로 세디 나시 도그리 해제 세디게 나시 도바나 세치마게 된다 야고 주야게 세치미 된다 야고 주야래 냠내제게 dum바들리그리 해서 오르와다
Reflecting in this way, we come to develop wisdom, develop a clear understanding that this life will end. And looking at this continuity of lives, we'll see firstly that this life is so short. If we look at the time span that has passed, and certainly that which lies before us, not only has there been lifespans since the beginning of this time, but the time span before us also is without end. And this then places the importance of this life in a whole new perspective. This ensures that we will change what we value, change our priorities, change where we put our time, put our energy. This is so important. This is so important. And in this way, we open ourselves to the Dharma, because things that currently draw us in or repel us will be seen in a new perspective. They are of no real importance. There's an expanse of time before me, and I need to accumulate causes so that they go well. These life events that currently arise and I grasp at, seeing them as important, have no essence. They are not worth my time or energy. And in this way, through challenging our grasping at permanence, coming to see the opportunity that abides in our hands, coming to change what we value and prioritize, we'll be able to enter into the Dharma. Our grasping at permanence will be weakened in this way, through reflecting on impermanence well, and rather we'll focus on our future lives. Then in our ongoing activities, the accumulation of causes that will benefit us in the future, that will be at the forefront of our mind, rather than the mere delights and frustrations of this life.
number sheba sem shu gorwa ma do phami kuta duba zam duden duba zam mi chagi ma chagi marwa dele number sheba ma shu na mi chagi mar mi chagi mar jesa phami duden ni du yo do dele ya jik sem chi shu yo de di sem dangbo shu ye gi ji dangbo de gawa sha go resenda de ge wang ma ba do wa de ma do sha na ma do sha go mar yo go jesa di gyu di de debu le je gyu ji le de ni gi go re ji le de ni di nga ma de gawa Nama Karshawas, that Bardoas, Yawangan Bardoatlesha. Then do Shadu, do ya, Jebachi on the Kapla, Yawangama the Totu Gore. Dadina Shinjin Ma Jebajana, Tangi Subudi, that Ma Judo, take Lord Mupchuto, the Juju, but the Mupju, take Guy, the Mupstamacharo, Mupstamachar, the guy, the Mupchingaji Chang, do Suchen, and Gazam Jilia, Subuchasang, Meva Child, the number shepherd Parduguro, that number shepherd. Yundi, Gawa Dugures, Zawin Meva Chagger Besson, Zawagin Meva Chagger Mare, Chitu, that Gawa Dugos, Giava Chimagi, Bardo and Madugores, Chidda Giva Chima to Gore. Chizang some da Kiji Jibu, Guletin, Guletin, Juarez, Lucid, Guletin, Jua Kiji Jiba, some Mitaba, some da Ya, some do some Tawatin, Giavangama Yuba Hago to Yada. Delatin Mama, some Tabin, Giava Chima Yuba Hago to Ya. Chizan Dinigi, Giavangachi. Juviatang, Deniki, some dana to Chevena, called Kiji Jipiki, Gudan, Yella, Durbalet in some time, and the Kiawangama, Chimaya, in Bayan, Delatin and Getuya, Yungorua.
Imagine everyone sitting here, watching at home, you accept reincarnation. But you check for yourselves whether you live with this knowledge, you're guided by this knowledge. You base your values, your decisions, what dominates your mind, by this knowledge. So if not, then again I encourage you to reflect on impermanence, because it's through reflecting on impermanence that one can come to realize past and future lives, so that it's not mere theory, but it actually alters how what one thinks, alters what one values and places importance on. So for example, one reflects that a child is suitable to be called 10 years old, independence on having previously been 9 years old. Similarly, the one year old can be called such, independence on previously being an infant, and the infant is suitable to be called such, independence on previously being a fetus. And then at the point, so we see this process of change, because there's this momentary change from moment to moment, enabling this progression, this continuum. So we hear, and sorry, as a translator, I missed a line here. So we missed if we're looking at our own continuum from where we are now, going back, and then later going forward, we see how we can be of a particular age, independent on what came before. We trace this back to being a fetus, and then the body in our mother's womb, this came about from sperm and egg meeting. So this is our body came from the lineage of our parents. But merely a sperm and egg meeting does not constitute life. Consciousness needs to also enter the fertilized egg. And that consciousness did not come from the lineage of our parents' body. Rather, this is the continuum, the mental continuum that has traveled throughout this life and came from the intermediate state. From the intermediate state, the consciousness entered the fertilized egg, and then the fetus grew and developed. And through this process of momentary change of body and mind, we find ourselves here in the present moment. And then it's past. And the continuum continues with this process of momentary change, leading up to the point when we will be, say, 80 years old, and we'll only be 80 years old, independence on previously being 79, and so forth. And we'll reach the point where this body cannot continue any further, and the momentary change leads to the mind and consciousness separating. And the body will continue to degenerate and decline and rot, but the consciousness, this continues too, continues into the intermediate state. And this process continues. So in this way, through thinking about impermanence, one comes to actually realize past and future lives. And by realizing it, it has a profound impact again on what one values, where one puts one's time and energy.
Denigi Jeba Jiji, Anzuki, Gewangama, do Sempe Gewangama, Nebiki, Tema, Neba, the Giovana, Neba Digi, Gevana, Tema Gedu, Gewangama, Yomares, and Betroto did to Dorures, the Gewangama, Yomares, and Be Samlo, Loshedi, Meva, Suela, Nimbo di Garsani, Sunus, and Gewangama, Topic, Tema. Gewangama, Yoba, Topi, Tema, Jura, Neba, said Neba, Seme, Neba, Surua. Di ngeba di ke yondu tseme nge yondu ane kewa nga ma yo ma re sempi dindigi lo she di do ru re meba cha ru re so jesa di kewa di na shin kewa chima du sempi kewa chima nge bi ngeba tsema di ke yondu kewa chima yo ma re sempi samlo di do ru re jesa di ngeba den do do se du sun di ti chasan ja yo re ba.
This fits with these same two lines from the Paramanavattika, where through generating a ascertaining consciousness, this realizing valid cognizer, realizing past lives, we abandon the contrary superimposing mind, believing that there are not past lives. Similarly, with future lives, by generating an ascertaining consciousness that there are future lives, we abandon the wrong consciousness that does not accept future lives.
This is a do Samlon Alba, that is one Jugi, Jeba Che, Samlon Alia, Jeba, and Gumten Samda, do Chidene, Tarduing Hebading, or Benazuki, Na said, Na Cariciore, Na Caridi Jevare, Sipotsuin, D. Canisi Cugares, and the Gulpa sometime Jeba Chedu, Ya Jeba Chedu, and the quote Tardutella, and the Javangama Tam Jitoyada. Then Masam Dai Machepa Chedupala, and Tamakewa Chimato. Chizanzuki. That the Niki, Duchin Cheba Chede, then I said, Shangela, good and Gila, Tuni, Gildu, good and Gila, Matubajim, Gig Minusebe, some time you do. Tomba Toya, Tanya Ruore. Cousin Tomba is a dancing digger, Garzingo said, Kala and Matuba Rango when you do a Zinduva. Chazan Ha said, good and Gila, Tuni. Gewa the door to good and Gila Tuba to Gorova. You don't get Tuba how good. Kala and Matuba said, did the Tatara check me to us and bigger? You don't Gula do do a Gila do do us. Chick Tuba de Rahachil Tuba the how to which is that Dineza, Coton Toya let Tanya and Ru and Azuki Mitaba some daddy.
I encourage you to engage in this meditation. And it's important here to use reasons. Not to merely accept, because what is being said here isn't intellectually challenging, but use reasons, because that is how one comes to realize this. Not just understand, but realize it so it transforms our way of thinking. So this I, where did it come from? And go through this process, look in the body and the mind, seeing this process of change, and how it goes from life to life, both in a backwards direction as well as in a forward direction to future lives. This then, when one, as to the extent one comes to realize the impermanence of the I, one then will recognize that this I is a dependent arising. It is not independent. It is a dependent arising. And this then aids our realization of emptiness, what we've been hearing teachings on all this time. Because recognizing that there's a process of a momentary change, so there's one moment of time to the next, as well as influence of causes. We see dependency on causes and parts and labeling. Therefore, the self cannot be self-existent. It cannot be independent. It is clearly dependent. This then aids the realization of emptiness, links in the same meditation into reflecting on emptiness.
다 제주게 된다 님보 가르sun 거라서네 지상 안주 유 간신에 강라야 마되바 랑구 뭐니 죽도 현세대 자와기니 매바레스 지상 안주 나야라 강라야 마되바 랑구 뭐니 죽도 현세 자와기니 요 말레스 안주 나야라 랑구 뭐니 주바 네 마되바 랑구니 난거데 나와나 신지 자와기니 요 말레지 다나 강라야 마다 랑구 뭐니 주바 매바나 아니 매바레베스네 매바 말레스 见贤起来对用的见的错用的带来的那几下用过来离过来这嘞就像贤来对呢离过来下来见的错用的这个下过来 아니 지견라 마디어 봐지 나와 간데 두세 봐지는 녀메려래서
In this way, then, going through the meditation first on impermanence, leading into a meditation on emptiness, one then comes to recognize that the self, the person, does not exist from its own side at all. It does not exist in the way that it appears at all. But that doesn't mean the self is non-existent. The self is the dependent arising on causes and so forth. When we investigate, cannot find the self, the self that appears to us cannot be found. But there is a self, the conventional self, which is a dependent arising.
매바르스네 매바 말레스 콜 가신 끼인지 초원도 님의 외다 차바 습습게다 되니게 차사직 초원도 배닝지오지 가서를 샤우고레스 지선 끼인지 초원도 샤우고 끼인지 마초나 차바스 개빈의 님의 외에면은 아니디 용 말에 아니 님의 외에나 차바 습습지 마잖아 용 말. 차바 슉 쳐져잖아 용 말에 지선도 님의 외에다 차비기 마자야 이디베 룽다 차상 배 튜브를 차여도 되는지 끼인지 초원도 갑라 지자 샤용고레스 지산 샤용도 대파 때게도 가화두신 째네 아니 잠 파바바 잠들레도 마통아 차르고로 어디는 시기레스 지산 강라에 마디오바 랑은 왜네 줍되긴 최 강야 되는 시요 말레스 지산 최 간데 시네 현실을 뛰네 마나솔은 낭삼 요레스지 단다지 송거다 줘
Thereafter, one can use the analogies to deepen one's understanding. For example, all phenomena appear to our consciousness as being self-existent. So too does a rainbow. But when we investigate to see if the rainbow exists in the way that it appears or not, we come to recognize it does not. It's not independent. It doesn't exist by way of its own nature. It very clearly comes about in dependence on causes. When one searches, one cannot find the starting point of the rainbow. Rather, one comes to recognize independence on moisture and light, a rainbow appears. And independence on a change in those causes, the rainbow vanishes. So therefore, the rainbow is a dependent arising. That independence on causes merely appears to our consciousness. It exists as a dependent arising. Does not exist by way of its own nature, despite appearing so. And the same text continues. All decrease and increase dependently, just due to being together with incompatible factors. From familiarity with that antidote, self-grasping is transformed. As a consequence, finally the contaminations are removed.
난 딥당 풀중 템바군선 딥세드 마 니벌 마선 충충 좋아되세 거를 딥세드 풀루 중화세된 야 니버 공패도 쳐야야야 니버 직첨부 차도 풀루 중화세 딥당 풀중 템바군 단다 가르스고르세네 대진이야 셰바데 직바랑 저기 덴진 마릭바세디 아니마 곧디 년보 덴제 동방이 또베 셰럽 공바이나 곧마 뉴버충충충 그래서 뉴버충충 집좀 매바로 그래서 덴진디 덴바진베 겐세위제라 덴진데 가지 삼다나 뉴버체를 줘야스 가요 말고 덴바 다가라 덴진 코로나 직뒤마도 야 공원에 공도페 뉴버체를 줘야스 가요 말 덴진데라 제상고 뉴버체를 줘야스 가요 말 덴진 진세 이나 덴진데레 년보 다음에 봐도 베셔로 곰묘도 덴진데 마 뉴버충충을 집주 그래서 집주 그래죠 단 덴진데 마 집주 덴진디 가지에네 곰바이네 그 뉴버체를 줘요 말이에요 콜레 년보 덴죠 곰바이네 년보도 곰바이네 그만 뉴버충충을 집주 그래서 뉴버충충을 가지를 매바 차로 그래서 그러나 집당세대
그래서
then Dinzin the Nuba Gombe to Ya Homare, Dile Yaga Chas Yomar, that could Nuba Chas Gayoma, Dinzin Dagara need Yoma, Dilia Goni pay Yomar Delia.
This is how I understand these things. So then looking at the first line, all decrease and increase dependently. This then has the same meaning as mentioned earlier. The ignorance of true grasping is something that we are tremendously familiar with, deeply habituated to. But if we just remain as we are now, governed by the ignorance of true grasping, it's not going to, on its own, increase any further. There aren't causes to make it increase any further. It is as it is. On the other hand, though, when we introduce contrary causes, the antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness, that will increase, and to the extent that increases, proportionately, the ignorance of true grasping decreases. So that then is the meaning here of the first line.
Jiptas. That Puljung said, Puluchua said, that the Denzi Nebo, Tomba to be shared up the Gomba in the young or one going to pay Nubal Max on the church, dry or rest. Then I to Dambo, Tomba to be Jebachi Dambo, Tomba to a Jebache, Tomba Denji to Tomba to be Topatsamaji or Jebatsamaji. Delivery Jebatsama, Tomba to be Topatamadia, Gomcomus, Gazam Chile, Dunjidan, Magaya Manawa, Tomba also to be also in water. And then I did that the Niki Tomba also to be loading a new church, and then Gazam Chile, Sanji, Moya, child, the Niki Tomba also to be Kembadi, Church Hamji, also to be water, more usual. Just that did Masona Tomba to be Lodi. And a Gomba in a Gom going to Nuba Gasam Chilia, Nuba Shuji, Chambers, and Nuba Church, Puluchu, or Chotuba, Nuba, and Deniki Gomba to dry your ass, Tomba to be Lodi, Gomba in a Gomba, more going on the Petra orders. The she Denzing, Demba to be Denzin, Gazette, Gom Devena, more going to Pedro Yamara, more some did. Toba was more Delian, Shanda Tonje, Nubal Master Chelsea Chayoma, Koran Denzindi, Jishu Chelsea, Nubaro J. Dulemato, go more going to Payamara. That don't want to be Jebatos. Denzindi could Denzin Ranji, Duamado, you are just came into a Denzin Gazocomanaco, Monsum Child, you are Regamo, Denzin Ranji and Dugore. That don't want to be Jeba said, Tobarwa, the Comiodu. Toba the part dash, one some more chargor. The equal Toba della Dunji and Ten Nangore. That Dunji and Madeva Nanjin don't need one some to be one some more chagorwa. That Tony wants to that is something you don't buy you to Lodigi, that Tony mother Shanda check I to go Marwa. That did gom Jagazam Jilla, Tammy to Persia, Sanji, Namki, or Charadu. Don't buy you to go to Kunzubi check, I check. Tamji was some don chargo, I said, that I made a pava, I said, on those two go, I said, Chazan Denzin de la Denijoyama, don't buy you to be Nimbo, Denzin, Nimbo, don't you to be shut up till Puluchuas, Nubocone, want to go to Peria, your essay or that.
The ignorance of true grasping, this cannot be developed further than what it is, because it is so. Whereas the antidote is contrary mind, that the wisdom realizing emptiness certainly can be. So to understand this, we take first the wisdom realizing emptiness, and first one comes to understand emptiness, meditate, study, meditate, study, meditate, and the understanding of emptiness grows within us. In this way, the wisdom of understanding emptiness is increasing. It is growing and developing. And eventually, one gets to the point where one realizes emptiness inferentially with a valid cognizer. doesn't stop there. One continues. And then eventually realizes emptiness with a valid cognizer, but now directly. And doesn't stop there. Continues until the omniscient consciousness is attained, and all phenomena are known. So this is the process with the wisdom realizing emptiness, how it increases. With the ignorance of true grasping, there's no such process. There's no such process that one reflects ever more on true grasping, and then comes to realize that phenomena exist by way of their own nature, inferentially, and later directly. There is no such development for ignorance, but there is for wisdom.
어디나 신당은 지바로 왔다 그신 딱받침 받아 따선 대시 셰바나 신 딱받침 배 따선세야다 디니 뭐 미다바 또배 참아서 이마이나 제사다 딱받침에 따선디 디 그런 가지나 따선 라지 되마도 니버 샤나 공부도 줘야 매래 제사다 디 년보 미다바 또배 참아디 다 공부 지도 그 누베 찰세 누베 탐에도 펴야지. 그래서 나 담보 미다바 또비기 미다바 또 되네 미다바 또 로디 공부 미다바 또 원순 용어도 대한 공부에서 다른 남진 용어 쳐도 괜 탐제다 제 최 탐정 원순 또비 캠바 자르고 봐. 그래서 되네 자 미다바 또 로디야 그 공부에는 이 거주 검지기 그 야라드나 마자와 그래서 그 추진도 공부에는 뭐 공부도 펴도 그래서 그래서 다 되네기 미다바 또 로디 공명도 딱받침에 따지는 마집주고레스 딥다 풀중 세대 미다바 지솔레 자야 돼 딱받침에 미다바 님보 미다바 또배 참마도 공부하네 뭐 공부도 주고레스 제 공부할 때네 공부하나 따선이디마 네 고말 집주고레 매 글리글리시 매도고레스 매바 자도고레스 그러와.
And so too with the wrong consciousness grasping at permanence as well as the wisdom realizing subtle impermanence. As we cultivate the wisdom realizing subtle impermanence, this grows and grows and grows. Whereas grasping at permanence, this wrong consciousness, it just continues to grasp at permanence. But as its contrary mind, the wisdom grows. The grasping at permanence, which it could not grow any further, it decreases. So as the wisdom increases, the contrary ignorance decreases.
다 믿은 초다 진이 치르세도 don다라 가르송어서는 대시 아주 녀모바디 만 집주그래라로와 지난 디 김자로 집주베 김자 가래라네 디 믿은 초 배낭아주 덴지디기 믿은 초 데메토베 셰랍디 그 녀보레스 지난 걸 녀보 예비치르세요 믿은 초다 진이 치스 덴진디기 도초 믿은 초 다음에 바토베 셰랍 녀보 예비치르스 님보 여바 인자 디고 님보도 공부할 때는 그 집주고 그래서 세상 그 집에 김장 가래서 집주고도 집주고 김장 가래라나 디 도초 미튼 초 다음에 봐 동방이 또 비게 셰랍디 그 님보래서 세상 디 님보도 공부하나 그 매봐서 그래서 미튼 초다 진이 치르세.
Looking at the second line, let's read them together. All decrease and increase dependently just due to being together with incompatible factors. What this refers to, as you see later on in the line, there's a term contaminations which are used. In this context, it means afflictions. Other contexts, it would be stains, but here, afflictions. The afflictions have an antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness. These two are contradictory, they're incompatible, they're not harmonious. They cannot abide comfortably together. Therefore, as we increase our wisdom, we decrease our afflictions. Correspondingly, the contaminations, the afflictions decrease proportionate to our increasing strength of wisdom.
그래서 니기 가르친 거라서네 딱 안아줘 세월다. 안아줘 찾아 상기 자준비지부 토벌 제배네 톱투그레스. 안아줘 상기고 뭐 토벌 제배네 톱투그레스. 딱 안아줘 자준비지부 토야세디 안아줘 녀모바 사본네 제바 빵야 되래. 디 사본네 제바 빵 바이나 자준비지부 토고로와. 녀모바 사본네 제바 빵 투그레 투고 말했으네. 빵 투그레스. 가르스네 데레 녀보요레스. 진짜 년보 다음에 보도 비셔라요. 네 공부이나 고 마집주 그래 고매가 자주 그래 지자 방투 그래 지자 방투에서 타바 톱투 그래 지자 상지에 고방 톱투 그래 되네자 그래서네 고 덴진디 바샤데 제 방야디 디기 년보요랬대 다음에 또비 동방이 또비 시라디 년보래 디 공발할 때네 디야 뭐 공부도 푸도 침배도 상지에 고방 톱고 지자 고 방투 그래 지자 나서 차사다 그래서네 녀모가 방투 그래 상지에 고방 톱도 타바 톱투 그래 파베 간사야 차투 그래 그래서 나주기디 이 바시에디 녀모바디레 디 녀모바세기 년보요래서 년보요반자 안디가 저기 디 제반에 소이 나서 심주 제제 냠는 제반에 한 차사 톱투야래서 그러면
Combining this with what we've looked at previously this weekend, all of us can achieve the Buddha ground. We can all attain this because we can abandon afflictions together with their seeds and imprints. When we abandon afflictions together with their seeds, the state of an arhat, a foe destroyer, is attained. And we can do that because the afflictions and their seeds are contrary to the nature of the mind. They are adventitious. They are not the nature of the mind. And therefore, through developing the antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness, which is actually in harmony or concordant with the nature of the mind, those adventitious afflictions fade away. As we increase the wisdom realizing emptiness, which is in harmony or concordant, compatible with the nature of the mind, and we thereby proportionately decrease the incompatible factors, the afflictions which are incompatible with the nature of the mind. And in this way, we can gain certainty that we ourselves can attain complete freedom from suffering, liberation. And by conjoining this wisdom with bodhicitta, even enlightenment is possible for all of us.
강배 날배 장모 시고라서는 장모에는 심지어만 살로다요랬으면 살로다요 바지 하고는 되니고 어디 장모에는 장모데 매바서요 살로다요로 봤으면 비게 섬데도 곧 델이야 아니 강한 매바 자루고 근데 차와 시고요라서는 차와에나 가야마디 이거 장로다요로 봤어 제가 장로다는 차와 매바 자루 되니 강한 민도 왔으면 비게 제가 되니게 삼다에 네 차위기 영화에게 차와디기 년보 장모여바 죄바여게 탑람여바 하고 해도 어디를 줘베네 당한 탑람메나 다들 차와 쉬워 다들 갈래 쉬워 죽음에서 죽음하러 봐 지난데 어디 차와를 이내 될이야 아니 지금 장로다야요 지난 두신 베지다도 차와요 그냥 강한 책임 말했을 델마 줘야야 샘져요 말어 봐 디나지 눈바지나 아데델레데 강바 디날도에 배 장모레서데 탑람멘다 장모레 캬니 되수고 말했으면 누구 말어 봐 아데 장모르 이내 살로 봐야요서도 탑람이여 하고는데 아데 줘야 강아요 말어 봐 디나시 아저게 파베 고방 토에게 람 토에게야 탑람이여 하고는 냠네 제반디 줘투고 봐서는 강아요 매봐 니 나진 다르비오 고바 토야다 산지오 고바 토야기 탑람이여레 냥아주 녀모바디기 디바디기 매바서야레 녀모여 제상아주 디바사여네 녀마 디바 망보사여네 가요 말곧 디매바서야 탑람이여레스 녀보 고매여레스 마음바나가주 녀모 마게 가서 탑람 고매여 녀보 고매여 제도 디 공발할 때는 아주 제 투브레스 비가 소소야 뽑어게야다 근데 디네게 뽑어게 dim바게 제가주 두스 냠는 제바나 안두스는 제 고구레서 단다 인보데 송고하다
Really, I want to encourage you to reflect on the many points raised this weekend. Because being confused by ignorance, we keep making wrong decisions. For example, if we're invited to go somewhere, which would be really nice to go, but it's freezing cold, we say, no, I'm not going anywhere, it is too cold. When we could actually go somewhere that whilst it's cold, we can dress appropriately, and when we get there are heaters. If we were to recognize the reality that we can wear warm clothing and rely on heaters at our destination, understanding the reality of the situation, we wouldn't be fearful, we wouldn't be hesitant, we'd immediately embark. Similarly, we need to reflect on what's presented here to come to understand we can attain Arya paths. There's no need to hesitate, there's no need to be fearful. All obstacles, all challenges, they can be overcome. we can transform everything that arises to our mind. We can gain freedom from all that torments us. There's no reason to be fearful, there's no reason to hesitate. So I encourage you to reflect like this, because this too helps to open the door to the Dharma through giving one confidence and inner strength, as well as a determination to utilize what remains of this life well and to cultivate the causes required to bring about freedom of suffering.
Adinma degom bale da yurbe lala saba seba gyurus. Degom bale da yurbe lala saba seba gyurus. Chiza saba seba gyurus idi ngado jajun betigo toguri ese orde. Chiza saba sede nyomo base ore. Chiza degom bale da yurbe sidi da de sede garesin deshi ngado ge da me ba seban da me ba tobe tongba yi tobe lodi 공부할 때네 동방이 또 별로 양호 공 야권에 공도 표현도 아 저기 녀모 된진디게 마 이거 충충을 맞으나 그지데 다 매바 자도 그래서 제가 라라 사바 세바 교르시데다 라라 사바 세바 저 가시에서 가시에서 가신 되니게 다음에 봐또 똥이 또 별로디 그 무디지 공간지 있나 대수기 녀모바 찾아 빵지 자주메 두고 두고서 마공반다 두고 말해서 라라 사바 가시게 두고를 해서 왔다 라라 사바 세바 교수는 라라스네 가시에서 다 수이 두고를 했나 제가 다음에 봐또 똥반이데 공부 양내 야도 공부래나 되네 공원디기 녀모가 차산 파 세전에 자주미지부 두고를 해제래 마공반이나 두고 말해서 왔다 라라 사바 세바 교수 대공발에 다 유배 라라 세바 교수들 동방이 또비 된진기 년보 동방이 또비 셔러 공바이나 된진이 매바 차로 그래帮助고 사본나 제帮助 그래 예제래 제산 되네기 공제 수유 공바이나 공관디게 다시미 되고 토주 그래서 사바세지 또 그래서 마공바이나 도구 말해서 그래 라라라서
나저 잡채제들 신의 토끼래.
네 라라스네 갑갑레시도 갑레세다 갑 라라스네 미카셰카셰스 칸사카시 라라스도 지수 제가 라라사바 세바 교수도 녀모바 님보 다음에 봐또 베셔라 곰 되네 곰관 되기 아니 녀모바 가서 세제 자주미지부 토구리 해서
And the verse concludes with these two lines. From familiarity with that antidote, self-grasping is transformed. As a consequence, finally, the contaminations are removed. So Genlo's commented now that what I've translated as finally should mean a few or sometimes, which is another way to translate the same word. I don't know how it would work in the sentence, but anyway, I'll present it as he said, but what we have, I think, fits. So the word we have here for contaminations, as mentioned earlier, the meaning here is afflictions. So that it has a broader meaning. Usually it's the word for stains. But here the meaning is it's written in a general sense, contaminations, because it refers to afflictions. So the meaning is presented here by gaining familiarity with the antidote. In other words, by meditating again and again on emptiness, one's wisdom, realizing emptiness, grows. And as we saw at the beginning of the verse, as that wisdom increases, proportionately, the ignorance of self-grasping decreases. Proportionately, the afflictions that result from self-grasping also weaken. Recognizing this, we come to see that the state of a foe destroyer is possible. Arising as an arhat is possible, but it will only be attained if we apply ourselves. If we apply ourselves, this is the result to be achieved. If we don't apply ourselves, it cannot be achieved. And that last segment that I just mentioned was the explanation of the word we have as finally, which means more like sometimes or a few.
Lala sene kansa lala ni sido mi kansa mi khashe se mi lala sido mi khashe se mi chasa mare se jesan saba seba lala saba seba kyusin kansa chasang ge dachu mi jibu thuguri be lamna mare dame ba to be nyembo di sushin do gomgan digi ge top thuguri es magom ba no top thug mare jesan lala saba seba ju kansa dame daji nyembo kansa dame to be sherap di sushin no gomgan kansa 건축이 라라 대수기 덮두고 라라서도 지고라 강사 가시에서로 대수기 겁니다 라라서 대수 도구를 해야지.
This term finally then, so it should be understood as meaning some people. And the meaning then in this context is that in answer to the question, will everyone become an arhat? The answer will be no. Only those who apply the antidote. So some people will become arhats. Who are those people? The ones who cultivate, who apply the antidote. They are the ones who will become arhats.
나 돈다 만족의 가르친 것은 제산 된진기 년보 녀모백이 년보 아니 된 녀모바 차상 용석이 녀모바 된진 마릭바지 니기 년보도 동방이 또 베셔라지스 동방이 또 베셔라데 야 곰바이나 딘지기마 니버 총총지 마 집조 매바 차르고 레제레 누송 제사다 디네 곰요도 동방이 또 베셔라데 야네 곰요도 곰발라데네 야 니버 철셔셔 야 니버 철가 야 공배도 베르고 레제레 디네 인자당 저기 디니기 동방이 대sem제 탐지기도 내 전주섬 6년 말라바제 매바제 나주 아니 지기 녀모바 동방이 곰바이나 디니고 곰간디기 아니 그 사바시도 녀모 자주메도 도주고 레스 다 전주섬 6년 랑제 sem제 탐지기도 난달 도시 동방이 곰바이나 아니 녀모바 바샤다 사바시 사바 녀모바다 바샤다 제바세네 산주고바 도바규고 레스 디니 곰간디기를 규고 레스 그러다 전주섬 6년 랑제 아니 동방이 곰바이나 아니 녀모 바샤다 제바다 산주고바 도주고 레스 제가 전주심 6년에 랑제 마곰바이나 산유고바 도둑 말해서 디나 신다 동방이 또 베셔랍디 곰바이나 사보나 제바 녀모서도 제 빵에 타비고바 도둑을 해서지 난 디네 도둑을 해서 내가 저 너나 안지 순고로 봐.
The meaning then, to summarize the meaning of this verse, is that all of our afflictions, they arise from the ignorance of true grasping, which has as its antidote the wisdom that realizes emptiness. These two, though, have a relationship in that as one increases, or a dependent relationship, as the first line says, as one increases one's wisdom understanding emptiness, our ignorance, misapprehending, misunderstanding reality decreases. Moreover, our ignorance grasping at true existence, because this ignorance is incompatible with the nature of the mind, it cannot be developed. It cannot continue to increase. It can remain, but it cannot increase. Whereas our wisdom, because it is compatible with the nature of one's mind, that can be increased ever further. And now into the third and fourth line, increasing our wisdom ever further results in the attainment of the state of an arhat. But will everyone attain such a state? Only those who apply themselves to cultivating wisdom. Moreover, though, those who apply themselves to not only cultivating wisdom, but also bodhicitta, the state of an arhat that they will achieve is that of a Mahayana arhat, a Buddha. But that too is to be achieved by those who apply themselves.
어디네 자당 되지 쇼베 셰바 나시 카사다 데 쇼베 셰바 나시 다 동반이 아주 동반이 또한테 갑라 나 셈게 라신 아니 셈디 강라마도 랑문의 주변 동배 동상 도용 도고래 지난 도반자 셈게 라신 라신디 랑문의 주변 동배 동반이레스 동바레스 지난디 동바레 디네 자다 디니게 셈게 라신 랑문의 주변 동배 동반이디 상기 리크레스 지상가서 상기 투그레 가서 상기 리그어레스 오르다 리그어레스 Ade Karasene, Semke Ranshin, Rang when you to be Tongbadi, Semke Gasore, Sangi Rikres, Tangana to Sangi Tuguri, and Sangi Rigores, the Sungorova.
This weekend, we've looked at, in this topic, how the mind of all beings is naturally empty. This is our Buddha potential, that the nature of our mind is empty. This means we have the potential to become Buddhas.
Denzi marik pase nyomo mangbo yorba desugi ani kinji nga sanyu ko ba thup thup mare de nyomo ba de meba so thup maro wa sembege da jiwara lebeina di meba so thup res karesene denigi nyomo ba de meba so ya la ya digi to cho nyempo ani tongbanyi to be shira nyempo de yores 제사 님보 동방이 또 베시 네비 로지 요래 제사 동방이 또 로디 네비 로디 요나 대기 독초 녀모바 저도디에 차상 그 마집주 매바 자로 그래 님보 고민데 매바 자로 가서 거기 내제 뇌지레스 제사 뇌제데 가서 동방이 또 베시라디 된 녀모베 제위규 된징이 뇌지레스 뇌지레 제사디 뇌지디 파 숙처 땅에도 그 뇌자 녀모바디 파 집주 매바 집주레스
So if someone recognizes or accepts that they have the potential to become a Buddha because their mind, the nature of their mind is emptiness, then they may still hold the doubt that, well, when I observe my mind, I can see really how afflicted I am, that afflictions arise readily and often of great power and overwhelm me. This is beyond my capacity. That this may often be how we feel, powerless, that this is beyond me, that standing up to or transforming these afflictions is too hard, too difficult. But here we see in these verses from Padanavatika, this really is not the case. These afflictions, they're adventitious, they're temporary, they are superimpositions, and they can therefore be eradicated. They are what is to be refuted, and we can refute them because we can develop the refuter. There's a relationship of dependency, a proportional relationship, a relative relationship to our cultivation of the wisdom understanding reality and our ignorance misunderstanding reality. So this we need to reflect on, because it will give us the confidence, the courage and the commitment to ensure that our mind abides on the Dharma, abides with emptiness, and we don't come under the influence of the afflictions.
남 탐지 캠핑 오 규에 최 탐지 오선 또버기 오 규에 패져 용고래서 불로 중화 되네 인상 니 담에 또 베게 당하지게 다젤이야 아니 지금 군노 전슈 셈지 군내랑 아니 저 진바다 추즘라서 봐 전주기 되니기 띵이진기 저 제제 동반이디 공바이나 공보연배나 대 공바래 되네 녀모바스 녀사바 녀모베 바차다 제바 차서 빵빵지네 사바 세바 탈베 침지 탐지기 묘고만 도토그리에서 고 주그리에서 뒤뒤스 월당하지.
Because the wisdom that we are cultivating is in accordance with the nature of our mind, it can be developed through a great sequence of trainings from where we are now, continuing until we come to attain a path and eventually a valid cognition, realizing emptiness by means of a meaning generality, and further still to where emptiness is realized directly, and further still where the afflictions are greatly weakened and eventually eradicated, afflictions together with their seeds. And this is where one attains the state of an arhat. And if conjoined with bodhicitta, even the stains can be eradicated and Buddhahood achieved. So wisdom, our wisdom, realizing emptiness, can be developed up to the omniscient consciousness of a Buddha.
On the night on the sugar that Casada Dirisha, Dunda Diri, Dangajelang Zugula, Casa Sanji Rikio Bata, and then Sanji Rik rushing to be done by the Lobergi Timigi court. Lobergi Timagi pa Tumtivaremato, Rashi Timigi Tumiomares, Lobergi Timi Tumbares. Just a Lobergi Tima said good and Kinjile in the Jumi Timashe, Yomobare. Di meba suye di gyudan kinji le tine meba suye gore. Di meba suye nega se nyeba tongpa nyi tobe shera gomba le tine meba suye gore esaji. Di gomba ina tar chiga tachime tiba togore esaji. Jison. Ane kasan deji shoga, kasan da dir shoga shuba nashi. Chesan tongpa nyi di ngana zui jeba tongpa nyi tongyo du. Chesan tongpa nyi tongyo du. Kangan nanga chida rangshin chuba na wangima da nyamnyong iba chup tu gore. Dembazibe denzin de loshi imbade koso nyamnyong juptugure denzin de la gyabden chama mebade nyamnyong juptugure tong dembar meba tobe chama de la gyabden chama yobade nyamnyong juptugure sido soso nyamnyong leodu din tongni gombal ya pe semshul masona jige shiuji le tugo wada 제가 nyamnyong yobade lega로 가리네 디강아세 nyamnyong yona sim shumbadang ane odang ji tu mare nge kanga chingese be yung mare nyamnyo yo ba odi ko parem nyamnyo yo ba na ka ka chigo mare wa ля ga re che be na di ro 제가 되니 게 동반이 또나 대체상 nyamnyo le yo da chi gome ya 매바 쇠야 안 dumde우라 차 레로우라 차고마다 만저 깔레카 보러시 차고 말아 자 디수 차사 만 두수 용구리에서 다가 가사다 디링기 디 랍샬 마손에 디 숭고로 와당하잖아.
This weekend we've spoken quite extensively about our Buddha potential. And whilst we have this, it is obscured by the afflictions which so often overwhelm us. But these afflictions are adventitious. They are not the nature of our mind. They obscure our mind, they veil our mind, but they are not the nature of our mind. And this understanding has several consequences. Firstly, that not being the nature of the mind, they cannot be developed in the way that wisdom can. And secondly, they've come to obscure the mind in dependence on causes. They are dependent arisings. Therefore, thirdly, they can be eradicated through developing contrary causes, in particular, the wisdom realizing emptiness. Coming to understand this, we then gain confidence to apply ourselves again and again. This is so important because if we think of anything that we've tried to achieve in this life, or perhaps not anything, but things that are difficult, and we were apprehensive beforehand, we didn't really want to because it was difficult, and we thought, well, it's probably beyond me, and we made many excuses. But then if we were forced and we made ourselves, it would be difficult, our mind would have complained, but we persevered, and then we see some progress. Some light shines in, we see we're getting somewhere. Confidence arises. We think, this is difficult, but I can see light at the end of the tunnel. I can achieve this skill. And as we progress a little further, gaining confidence, we now start to take pleasure in what we are doing. And then our progress comes along quickly. So the way I've been presenting the topic this weekend is to encourage you to reflect in this way so that you can gain confidence and you can take pleasure in hearing their teachings and reflecting on them. That this isn't something that one needs to encourage oneself to do, but that one is enthusiastic about doing it. It's pleasurable. And this comes from gaining experience that we can do this. And we saw last night at the beginning with the bullet points that those who have gained actual experience of emptiness, who've given rise to realization with their valid cognition, they've seen this process for themselves. So for them, all doubts are gone. They have incredible strength of mind. For us, we need to try and emulate that. For them, it's natural now. They've seen how the process works, how phenomena do appear as truly existent, and how when we focus on an object, we grasp at it as being truly existent, and that from this all the afflictions come. And they've also come to see, though, because they have a realization of emptiness, that this process can be broken. Freedom is possible. So I encourage you to think, to reflect on this topic in the way that's presented here.
Sungorba, Chizana Samlotone, and this Nisudi Pashim, Jebache, Nisu, the how going to do, the Shin is Mayba, Zimbiku, Trototic, and Kadu, Meva Chadugures. The Niggin wind is a how go by the Yane, Yano, Gomba, Latin, Gomedu, going Nubakone on the Persia 2 race. Then Nubakone on the Perioid, and the Hamogo, Rick, with the Nomo Rick Chazada, Ma. New church, and Meva Chadogre, Tabata Temchimoko, Tugre, says that Anzuki, Semitone, Duchin and Yamlin Chitagi, Stungur, that Ninza, that Tisuya, Duciana, and some Jebache, and the Jian Mitaba, some Tawanaji, Mitaba, some Tayata, Dame, but Tombani said, Rang when to Nanta de Lola, Yakan is Nangu, Chipa, Six Samta, Nawana, Shinchita, Gale Matuba, Saji, sometime do, Gale Matuba, Nang, the Nawana, she Gale Matuba, radio made sitting on the Pumbo Tikipa, some Tavenda, and the Pumbo Sadi, and the Chiki. Dinade Sad, Sada, Chuda, Meda, Lungu, Chua, Shilia, Dingu Bata, and Shada, Rugota, Chada, Baba, Losoba, Chasan, Toba, like Dene Pumpo Juyoba, Chichi, Dinguba, and the Martin and Pumpo Judima, sometime, and Nangi, Amegi, and the Chiki, Pamegi, Lugi, Chua, Teletingu, Lulet in the tear. Namshetti, Shevati, Kitchingama, Gutashi, Mitaba, sometime. Kitchen ame kukule tingi yoba du sin jeba je shimju che de dine ngeba tingne jeba chi oda matem ba kala ma de ba se de rangwen na wa na sa ni mindua san biologic ngeba chi kile de ta tong ba ni to lo se ji ki go ro ba ta di ha go de di ha ne ya do ha ju ge gom che ne dang bo gom yang ju ge 동방이 비시네티고 봐 샘팅이 템불리고 말아 세상 고미어도 동방이를 되네게 동방이들 미치는 봐 띵이 고미도 잠바데 시신데 고미도 되네 제지도 별로 띵이 진 줍도 거봐 띵이 진 줍어 되네 되네 한 제지도 니 띵이 진 줍어 될라 되네 양 하동도 제바지 시랍지 관리 세상 당보 동방이 또 되네 동방이 당보 동방이를 제바지 삼다 된제 삼다 된 동방이 또 동방이 또 아니도 다 동방이를 되네 디 동바 또 유동방이데 미비기 신의 줍 신의 톱 신의 줍 세베젤라 된 신의 딩안에 사동 줍 딜하던 디고 야뭐 공패의 주어 다 두스는 사동 줍의 실라 송제세 토고 동방이를 미비 실라 송제 디 톱내 안에 고며도 된 동방이도 뭐 숨세 리고래 디야 권의 권의 표현도 되는 거 저게 지게 통 곰람 세데 야 곰람 림바디기 바 야래 되네 다른 나산이고 밀루비 밀로람 세디게 두고르바 디네자 두스체네 공부고레세 땡아줄야 지자디 공투면 나가지게 공매가 나줄 리규어레스 산유코마토 리규어레스 다디 안두스체네 수고르다 디네자다 나차사 다 디네기 토네 냠len 제고야지 자고를 당한도 두스체네 나서 차상 지바로 와드네
In this text, we've continuously been encouraged to come to understand reality, come to understand how phenomena exist in reality. The only way to do so is to use this incredible human intelligence that we have, gather knowledge, and investigate based on that knowledge, thinking for ourselves. If phenomena existed, how do phenomena appear? If they existed in such a way, what would the consequences be? And so forth. In dependence on investigation, on analysis, we will come to understand reality. But this needs to be done not just occasionally, for example, when hearing the teachings in class, but then in meditation, and then the next day in meditation, and also between meditation sessions, to be thinking about this. Because what we're trying to do is habituate ourselves to the conclusions of the meditation. Coming to see how phenomena appear, then through our investigation, recognizing they don't exist in this way, they are empty of existing in this way. And reminding ourselves of that in between sessions, deepening it in our daily meditation. To the extent we do this, we will deepen our understanding of emptiness, of reality, and as this wisdom of ours increases, proportionately, relatively, our afflictions will weaken. And that is something that a benefit we can experience in this very life, just through concerted effort. It's not beyond any of us. And the result is, we'll gain ever more peace of mind, less disturbed by life's difficulties, because we'll understand that what perturbs us, either draws us towards or repelled from, does not exist in this way. So such a response is really disproportionate. It's taking illusions as being real. Then in your meditation, you look at the self, you look at the aggregate, you look at a wide variety of phenomena. How do they appear? Do they exist in this way or not? And look. So if you take the self, you look for it in the body, you look for it in the mind, you see that it comes about in dependence on causes, parts, and impermanence, and labeling, and also you integrate the reflections on subtle impermanence, seeing that this body, it comes from eventually through the lineage of our parents, doesn't exist by way of its own nature, and our consciousness, this changes momentarily. Even before this life, our continuum was in the bardo, and before that, in a previous existence. Look at this sequence of momentary change, which is contrary to something existing by way of its own nature. So this reflection on impermanence greatly aids our understanding of reality. For it to have a transformative impact, this reflection has to be done repeatedly over a sustained period, in and out of meditation. And we must utilize the close friends of a meditator, vigilant introspection and mindfulness. Mindfulness has a dual purpose. The one is to hold the mind on the object. Vigilant introspection observes whether this is being done or not, and if it's being done well or not, if the mind is getting lax or not. And then, when the object is lost, mindfulness has the second function of recollection, recalling the object, bringing it back. And in this way, you utilize the two together. And also, you use both analytical meditation as well as placement meditation. Abide on each realization in the session, so as to strengthen the mental factor of meditative stabilization or concentration. And this is important, certainly for us too, because to really be transformed by our realization of emptiness, it needs to come together with a union of calm abiding and meditative insight. So for us now, meditating with mindfulness and introspection, using analytical and placement meditation, we are developing causes that will aid our later development of calm abiding. And once calm abiding is generated, it's relatively easy to develop meditative insight. And then, with a union of calm abiding and meditative insight, first on coarser objects, later on subtler objects, and eventually on the subtlest object of emptiness, we'll be able to give rise to the path of preparation. And thereby we'll have realized emptiness with the valid cognizer, with an inferential valid cognizer. And then what has been written on page 22, those bullet points, will be written about a yogin such as yourselves. So I encourage you to engage in this meditation, because when such a realization arises, your entire being will be focused on meditating on emptiness, because you know the path of seeing is attainable. And when that's achieved, the path of meditation and the path of no more learning. This is all possible because we have Buddha potential. The nature of our mind is empty. Therefore, all of this can be achieved. It's not beyond any of us. All of us need to do this. Myself, yourselves, all of us need to do this. And it's not beyond a single one of us.
Alright, that is
So thank you so much. Then we'll conclude here for this week and continue from the same place next time. But there are a couple of minutes. If anyone has questions left over from earlier, then feel free to ask. Then thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend. And those who are doing the Nungdays, enjoy those too.